It was one of those hot July nights in the small town of Willow Creek, the kind of night where the air felt heavy enough to choke you. The crickets sang endlessly in the grass, and every porch light seemed to hum louder than usual, attracting moths that threw shadows across the siding of houses. For most people in town, summer nights were for cookouts, late drives with the windows down, or sneaking out to the lake to swim under the stars. But for 17-year-old Alex Parker, this particular summer night would be remembered for something far darker. Alex had just finished a shift at the local gas station. He was lanky, sunburnt from days spent skateboarding around town, and restless like most kids his age. His parents trusted him, maybe more than they should have, so when his buddy Tyler called asking him to meet out at the abandoned fairgrounds, Alex didn't think twice. Tyler had that wild streak, the kind that got them both into trouble, but Alex liked the rush. It was summer after all. School was months away, and the night stretched long and open in front of them. By the time Alex got home, tossed his work shirt in the laundry, and grabbed a flashlight, it was close to midnight. The fairgrounds were a mile past the old highway, hidden behind overgrown fields where the county fair used to set up rides and tents decades ago. Nobody went there anymore, not since the fire in '92. But that didn't stop kids from daring each other to sneak in. Alex had been once before in the daylight, and remembered the half-burned Ferris wheel still rusting against the skyline, like a broken skeleton in the weeds. Tyler was already waiting when Alex arrived. His beat-up Ford truck was parked in the tall grass, headlights off, radio low. The faint strum of some country song drifted on the breeze, mixing with the endless drone of insects. Tyler leaned against the hood, a cigarette glowing between his fingers, grinning like he always did when he was about to suggest something reckless. "You ready for this?" Tyler asked, flicking the ash. Alex rolled his eyes. "Ready for what? You said we were just hanging out." Tyler pushed off the hood and grabbed a backpack from the truck bed. "We're doing more than that, man. I got beers, I got flashlights, and I heard something crazy about this place." Alex sighed but followed. He wasn't about to back out, not with Tyler watching. They ducked through a hole in the chain-link fence, the metal rattling behind them, and stepped into the dark skeleton of the fairgrounds. The moonlight caught on the Ferris wheel's twisted beams. A concession stand leaned to one side, the sign for cotton candy, barely readable through the peeling paint. The air smelled faintly of smoke even though the fire had burned decades ago. They walked deeper in, Tyler's flashlight beam cutting across broken boards and patches of tall weeds. Every step seemed to stir up the night itself. "You know the story, right?" Tyler asked. His voice was low, but not low enough to hide the excitement. "About the fire," Alex said. "Not just the fire. People said they never figured out how it started. Some said it was electrical, but others, they said it wasn't an accident at all. That somebody was here that night. Somebody who never left." Alex scoffed, though goosebumps crawled up his arms. "You mean like a ghost story?" Tyler nodded. "Exactly like a ghost story. People swear they've seen someone walking around here at night. Like a figure burned black, just pacing the grounds." Alex tried to laugh, but the sound felt thin. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But standing there, in the ruins of a place where something terrible had happened, he couldn't help but imagine shadows shifting just out of reach. They ended up near the Ferris wheel, where Tyler dropped his backpack and pulled out 2 beers. He handed one to Alex, and they sat in the grass. The metal structure loomed over them, blotting out part of the sky. For a while it was almost fun. They drank, swapped jokes, and tried to forget the whispers of the town's legends. But then Alex heard it. At first it was faint, like wind moving through the weeds. Then it grew clearer. A step. Slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel not far from where they sat. He froze, glancing at Tyler, who frowned and turned his flashlight toward the sound. The beam cut through the dark, catching nothing but the half-collapsed ticket booth. "You heard that, right?" Alex whispered. Tyler grinned nervously. "Probably just a deer." But Alex knew it wasn't a deer. The sound was too steady, too human. And it was getting closer. The footsteps stopped as if whoever or whatever was out there had realized they were being listened to. The silence pressed down heavy, broken only by the buzz of insects. Tyler swept the flashlight again, hand trembling slightly now. "Hello," he called, his voice cracking just enough to betray fear. Nothing answered. Alex felt his stomach twist. He didn't want to admit it, but he wanted to leave. Still, pride kept him rooted. He couldn't back out while Tyler stayed. They waited a full minute, not moving, hardly breathing. And then, just as suddenly, the footsteps started again, this time circling them, crunching through the weeds in a slow arc. Alex's mouth went dry. He stood, clutching the flashlight tighter. "Who's out there?" Tyler demanded. The sound stopped again, and Alex swung the beam wildly through the dark. Then, for the briefest second, he saw something. A man-shaped shadow standing between the posts of the old ride, blackened as though charred. The moment the light touched it, it seemed to slip away, dissolving into the dark. Alex staggered back, heart slamming in his chest. "Tyler, did you see that?" Tyler's face had gone pale. He didn't answer right away, just grabbed his backpack and muttered, "We're getting out of here." But before they could move, the sound returned. This time it was not footsteps but the creak of the Ferris wheel. Slow, groaning metal, as if something had set it in motion. Alex looked up, horrified, as the rusted wheel turned a few inches, then stopped. It hadn't worked in 30 years. There was no wind strong enough to push it. Tyler swore under his breath, grabbed Alex's arm, and pulled him toward the fence. They ran, stumbling over broken boards and weeds, their flashlights swinging wildly. Behind them, the creak sounded again, louder this time, followed by a faint laugh, low, distorted, almost inhuman. By the time they scrambled through the hole in the fence, both were shaking. Tyler fumbled for his keys, started the truck, and tore out of the field so fast gravel spit against the side panels. Neither spoke until the fairgrounds were nothing more than a shadow in the distance. Finally, Alex found his voice. "You saw it too, right?" Tyler gripped the steering wheel hard, his knuckles white. "We don't talk about this. Ever." But Alex knew he couldn't forget. The burned figure, the sound of the wheel creaking back to life, the laugh echoing through the night, those things had seared themselves into his memory. From that night on, every time he passed the old fairgrounds, he swore he felt eyes watching him from beyond the fence, waiting. And though he never went back, sometimes on hot July nights when the crickets sang and the porch lights hummed, Alex thought he heard it again. That slow, groaning creak of metal turning in the dark. Alex didn't sleep that night. Even when he finally made it home, laying in the dark of his room with the window cracked open to let in the summer air, his ears played tricks on him. Every time the floor creaked in the hallway or a branch scraped against the siding, he swore it was the sound of footsteps. Worse, he couldn't shake the image of the Ferris wheel shifting on its own or the glimpse of that charred figure, burned beyond recognition, standing between the beams as if it had been waiting for them. The next day, Tyler didn't text like he usually did. Alex tried to convince himself it was nothing, that Tyler was just busy or sleeping off the late night, but the silence stretched too long. By evening, Alex biked over to Tyler's house. Tyler's truck sat in the driveway, a familiar dent in the bumper, but the blinds were drawn and the house looked strangely lifeless. Alex knocked, waited, then knocked harder. At last, the door creaked open and Tyler's mom appeared, her face pale and lined with worry. "Oh, Alex," she said, voice trembling. "Have you seen him? Tyler didn't come home last night." Alex's stomach dropped. He hesitated, unsure whether to tell her the truth. If he admitted they'd been at the fairgrounds, he'd be in trouble. Worse, he didn't know how to explain what they'd seen. I thought he was here," Alex lied, swallowing hard. She shook her head. "I called the sheriff. They're looking, but if you hear from him, please let me know." Alex nodded quickly, then rode home in a blur, guilt gnawing at him. The last time he'd seen Tyler was when they'd torn away from the fairgrounds, Tyler pale as a ghost. But what if Tyler had gone back? The thought twisted Alex's insides. That night, Alex couldn't sit still. Around midnight, he grabbed his flashlight again. His parents were asleep, the house silent except for the hum of the AC. He slipped out the back door, hopped on his bike, and pedaled hard down the road toward the fairgrounds. The air felt heavier than the night before, as if the humidity itself was warning him away. When he reached the fence, the same gap waited, jagged metal bent aside. His pulse hammered in his ears as he ducked through. The place looked even darker tonight. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the weeds brushed against his jeans like grasping hands. "Tyler," he called, his voice shaking. No answer. The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the sky. Alex shined his light toward the ticket booth, the food stands, the rusted rides. Everything was empty, silent. But then, faint and distant, he heard it again, the creak of metal shifting. His chest tightened. The Ferris wheel, unmoving yet alive in its voice, groaned once more. And then he heard something else. Laughter. Not the playful laughter of kids, not even the nervous laugh of Tyler the night before. This was lower, distorted, like a voice stretched and warped by pain. It seemed to echo through the empty fairgrounds, bouncing from the rotted wood to the rusting steel, filling every corner of the night. Alex spun in place, shining his light everywhere. The beam caught on something near the carousel. Movement just for an instant. He forced his feet to move, crunching through the gravel as he approached. "Tyler!" His throat was dry. The carousel stood broken, its horses chipped and twisted, poles leaning at odd angles. The flashlight beam flickered over the peeling paint, over the empty platform, until it landed on something that froze him in place. Tyler's hat. It sat on the ground beside one of the carousel horses, dirty and torn, as if it had been ripped away. Alex knelt, reaching for it, when the horse beside him creaked. Slowly, impossibly, it rocked forward, then back as though something had pushed it. Alex stumbled backward, clutching the hat, when a shadow detached itself from the carousel's frame. It was the same figure he'd seen the night before, tall, human in shape but burned black from head to toe. Its eyes glowed faintly like embers in ash. Alex couldn't move. The figure didn't advance, didn't lunge. It only stood there, staring, as if daring Alex to come closer. The silence between them stretched, broken only when Alex finally bolted, sprinting through the weeds toward the fence. Behind him, the carousel groaned, then spun once, creaking as if invisible hands had set it in motion. The laughter followed him all the way to the fence, carrying across the night. By the time Alex burst out onto the road and jumped on his bike, tears stung his eyes. He didn't stop pedaling until he was blocks from home, sweat running down his face, lungs burning. He made it to his room, locked the window, and buried Tyler's hat in the back of his closet. He didn't tell his parents. He didn't tell anyone. The sheriff came by days later, asking if Alex knew anything about Tyler's disappearance. Alex shook his head, feeling his throat close up with every lie. But Alex knew the truth. Tyler hadn't just disappeared. The fairgrounds had taken him. And sometimes on long summer nights, Alex swore he could still hear his friend's voice, mixed in with that horrible broken laughter, calling faintly from the direction of the abandoned fairgrounds. In the quiet town of Pine Hollow, summer nights usually carried the scent of barbecues, the sound of children playing until the streetlights buzzed on, and the hum of cicadas so loud it almost drowned out everything else. But one summer, when the heat clung to the air like a suffocating blanket, a story unfolded that would haunt the town for decades. It began with Emily Carter. Emily was 21, a college student home for the summer, spending her nights working as a babysitter for families in the neighborhood. She had grown up on Birchwood Lane, knew every crack in the sidewalks, and could navigate the cul-de-sacs blindfolded. Babysitting wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough, and she liked the calm of watching over kids once they had fallen asleep. On June 23rd, she agreed to babysit for the Robinsons, a family who had just moved into one of the older houses on the edge of town. The Robinsons had a little girl named Lucy, 5 years old, with curly blonde hair and a stuffed rabbit she clutched wherever she went. The Robinsons' house stood apart from the others, bordered by woods that seemed darker and thicker than anywhere else in Pine Hollow. The house itself was beautiful but strange, with high windows, creaking stairs, and a wraparound porch that sagged slightly at the edges. When Emily arrived that night, the sun had just dipped below the trees, leaving streaks of orange and purple in the sky. Mrs. Robinson greeted her at the door, looking frazzled. "Lucy's already had dinner. She's in her room playing," she explained quickly. "We'll be home around midnight." Emily smiled and nodded, stepping inside. As she set her bag down, she couldn't help but notice the faint smell in the house. Old wood and something musty, like the air in an attic that hadn't been opened in years. Lucy was shy at first, hiding half her face behind the stuffed rabbit, but eventually warmed up when Emily suggested they play a board game. By 9 o'clock, Lucy was yawning. Emily tucked her into bed upstairs, the stuffed rabbit nestled under her arm, and turned on the small nightlight shaped like a star. "Will you stay here if I get scared?" Lucy asked softly. Emily smiled, smoothing her hair. "Of course. But you'll be fine. Just get some sleep." Lucy nodded but didn't look convinced. She stared toward the corner of the room as Emily left, whispering something Emily couldn't quite hear. Downstairs, Emily settled on the couch with her phone. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of old pipes. By 10, she was scrolling aimlessly when she heard it. Thump came from upstairs. Emily froze, listening. Another thump, softer, like something shifting. She set her phone down and stood, heart picking up. Maybe Lucy had gotten out of bed. She climbed the creaking staircase, the sound magnified in the silence. At the top she listened again. The hall was still. Lucy's door was closed, faint light glowing under the frame. Emily knocked gently and opened it. Lucy was in bed, eyes wide open, clutching her rabbit tightly. "What was that noise?" Emily whispered. Lucy's voice was small. "He's walking again." Emily blinked. "Who?" "The man in the hall." A chill crept up Emily's spine. She glanced into the hallway, empty and still. "Sweetie, there's no man. It's just the house making noises." Lucy shook her head firmly, curls bouncing. "No, he comes every night. He walks down the hall and he stops at my door. Sometimes he looks in." Emily forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's just your imagination. Go to sleep, okay?" But as she backed out of the room, Emily couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach. She left the door cracked, telling herself it would comfort Lucy. Back downstairs, she turned on the TV to drown out the silence. Minutes ticked by. Then came another sound, slow, deliberate creaking like footsteps on the stairs. Emily muted the TV instantly, blood rushing in her ears. She waited, breath caught in her throat. The sound continued, one step, then another. She jumped up, grabbed her phone, and crept to the bottom of the stairs. "Hello," she called softly. No answer. The staircase was empty. She forced herself up the steps, each creak under her feet echoing like a gunshot. The top, she saw it. Lucy's door, which she had left cracked, was now wide open. Inside, Lucy sat upright in bed, eyes fixed on the doorway. When she saw Emily, she whispered, "He's gone now." Emily's heart thundered. "Who?" "The man," Lucy said, pointing toward the hallway. Emily swallowed hard, fighting the urge to run. She searched the upstairs rooms, the bathroom, the guest room, even the master bedroom. Yet in the guest room, the window was open, the curtain swaying slightly in the warm night air. She shut it quickly, locking it. Her hands trembled. Back in Lucy's room, she sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm her. "It's all okay. Checked everywhere. Nobody's here." Lucy only pulled the rabbit tighter. "He doesn't like when you don't believe me." Those words lingered long after Lucy's eyes fluttered shut and she drifted into restless sleep. Emily sat there for nearly an hour, watching the shadows in the room stretch and shift, convinced at any moment she'd see something standing in the doorway. When she finally crept back downstairs, she didn't sit. Paced. Every noise set her on edge. The settling wood, the ticking clock, the faint scrape of branches against the siding. Then, at 11:45, she heard it again. Not upstairs this time. Behind her. She spun, flashlight beam slicing across the living room. For a fraction of a second, she thought she saw a figure. A tall man, shoulders bent, face shadowed, standing at the far end of the hallway. Then the light flickered, and he was gone. Emily's scream stuck in her throat. She backed toward the front door, fumbling for her phone, when headlights swept across the window. The Robinsons' car pulled into the driveway. Relief hit her so hard she almost cried. When Mrs. Robinson walked in, Emily plastered on a smile, trying not to shake. She didn't mention the noises or Lucy's words, or the figure she thought she saw. She didn't want to sound crazy. She only said good night, collected her money, and hurried out into the night air. But as she reached her car, she glanced back at the upstairs window. Lucy was standing there, pale in the glow of the nightlight, holding her rabbit. And behind her, for the briefest moment, Emily swore she saw the outline of a man, tall, shadowed, watching. The following evening, Emily tried to put the whole thing out of her mind. She told herself it was exhaustion, nerves, and an old creaky house that had tricked her into thinking she saw something. But no matter how many times she replayed it in her head, she kept coming back to Lucy's words. "He doesn't like when you don't believe me." 2 days later, Mrs. Robinson called again, asking if Emily could babysit. Emily hesitated, excuses forming on her tongue. But she needed the money, and something about the desperation in Mrs. Robinson's voice made her agree. "Perfect," Mrs. Robinson said with relief. "We'll be out late again." "Thank you, Emily." That Friday night, Emily drove back to the house on the edge of the woods. Dusk settled heavy as she pulled into the driveway, fireflies blinking in the shadows. The house loomed like it had been waiting for her. Lucy greeted her at the door, rabbit in hand. She looked tired, dark circles under her little eyes, as though she hadn't slept well in days. "Did you sleep okay this week?" Emily asked gently. Lucy shook her head. "He keeps walking. Every night. Sometimes I hear him whisper." Emily forced a smile, though her heart was pounding. "It's just dreams. That's all." Lucy gave her a look that pierced right through her. "No, it's not." After Lucy was in bed, Emily sat downstairs with her phone. Midnight crept closer. She told herself she was imagining things, that nothing would happen again. But deep down she knew better. At 11:30, the noises began. This time it wasn't just a thump. It was steady, slow, deliberate steps overhead, creaking across the old floorboards. Emily gripped the arm of the couch, her knuckles white. She gathered her courage, grabbed her flashlight, and started upstairs. Her heart slammed with every step. At the top of the stairs she paused. The hallway stretched ahead, dark except for the faint glow under Lucy's door. And then she saw him. A man, tall and thin, silhouetted at the far end of the hall. His shoulders were hunched, his head bent forward. His face was a blur of shadow, but Emily could feel his eyes on her. Her breath caught. She tried to speak but no sound came out. The man took one slow step toward her, then another. The boards groaned under his weight. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't leave Lucy. Forcing her legs to move, she sprinted to the little girl's room. Lucy sat upright in bed, rabbit clutched tight, eyes wide. "See," she whispered. "I told you." Emily slammed the door shut, locking it. She backed against the wall, flashlight beam trembling across the room. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't dare move to answer. Outside in the hallway the footsteps stopped. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then the knob rattled. Emily's stomach lurched. She held her breath, staring as the doorknob twisted back and forth. Slowly, deliberately, like whoever or whatever was outside had all the time in the world. Lucy whimpered, burying her face in the rabbit. Emily gathered her close, whispering, "It's okay, I'm here." But it wasn't okay. The rattling stopped. Silence again. And then, from just beyond the door came a voice. Low, raspy, almost like the sound of wind through broken glass. "Why don't you believe her?" Emily's blood turned to ice. The voice wasn't angry, it was mocking, taunting. She wanted to scream, but fear strangled her. She clutched Lucy tighter, praying for the Robinsons to come home. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, headlights swept across the upstairs window. The sound of a car door slamming broke the silence. Footsteps pounded on the porch. And just like that, the presence vanished. The air felt lighter. The doorknob stopped moving. Emily exhaled shakily as Mrs. Robinson opened the front door downstairs. That night, Emily told herself she was done. She wouldn't come back, no matter how much money she needed. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, Mrs. Robinson called again, not to ask Emily to babysit, but to ask if she had seen Lucy. Emily froze. "What do you mean?" "She's gone," Mrs. Robinson sobbed. "Her bed was empty when we woke up. The police are here now." Emily's heart stopped. She rushed to the Robinsons' house, finding police cars in the driveway, lights flashing. Officers moved in and out, neighbors standing on porches whispering. Mrs. Robinson, red-eyed and trembling, grabbed Emily's hands. "She was fine when we came home, fast asleep. But when I went to wake her this morning, she was gone. The window was open." Emily's knees nearly gave out. She wanted to tell the truth, that there had been something in the house, something not human, but the words stuck. Who would believe her? The search for Lucy lasted weeks. They combed the woods, dragged the creek, knocked on doors. But they never found her. The Robinsons moved away before summer ended. Their dream house now nothing more than a haunted shell. Emily left Pine Hollow soon after, but she never escaped what happened. For years she dreamed of that house, of Lucy's pale face in the window, of the shadow that stalked the halls. And sometimes on quiet summer nights, when the cicadas hum and the air is thick with heat, Emily swears she hears that voice again. Low, mocking, carried on the wind. Why don't you believe her? Summer in the mountains was supposed to be the best time of year for 17-year-old Tyler Grant. He had been waiting all year for this trip, a chance to leave behind the small Ohio town where nothing ever seemed to happen. His parents had trusted him enough to join his three best friends, Ethan, Jessica, and Rachel, for a week-long camping adventure in the Appalachian Mountains. The four of them had been inseparable since childhood, and though they were nearing the edge of adulthood, there was something about summer nights under the stars that made them feel like kids again. The drive up into the hills had been long but filled with laughter and loud music, Ethan drumming on the dashboard as Jessica sang along with the radio, off-key but cheerful. Rachel sat quietly next to Tyler, staring out at the endless forests passing by, her thoughts hidden behind her soft smile. Tyler had always noticed she seemed more alive outdoors, like the wilderness was where she belonged. When they finally reached the remote campground they'd chosen, the sun was sinking low behind the ridges, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. The campground was quiet, tucked away by a shimmering lake that reflected the last light of day. The odd thing was that it looked abandoned. The check-in shack at the entrance was empty. A hand-painted sign that read Lake Haven Campground, S 1962 swayed slightly in the evening breeze. The wooden cabins looked weathered but intact. A few picnic tables leaned with age, their wood splintering. There were no cars, no campers, no sounds of families or hikers. "Are we the only ones here?" Ethan asked as he stepped out of the car, stretching his arms. "Guess so," Jessica replied, brushing her dark hair from her face. "Kind of creepy, don't you think?" Rachel tilted her head, scanning the campground. "Maybe it's just early in the season. Or maybe people don't know about it. It feels forgotten." Tyler shoved his hands in his pockets, staring at the lake. The surface was still, so perfectly smooth it looked like a mirror. The woods surrounding it were dense and darkening with the fading light. Something about the silence made him uneasy, but he forced a grin. Hey, at least we'll have the whole place to ourselves. No loud neighbors. They set up their gear in one of the open cabins, brushing away cobwebs and laying out their sleeping bags on the creaky wooden floor. As night fell, they built a fire in the pit outside. Sparks rose into the dark sky, and the sound of crickets slowly filled the air, finally breaking the heavy silence. They roasted marshmallows, shared ghost stories, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. For a while, it felt like everything they wanted it to be. But around midnight, Rachel frowned and asked, "Do you guys hear that?" The laughter died down. "Hear what?" Jessica asked. Rachel held up a hand, her eyes scanning the trees. "A bell. Like faint, but it's there." They all grew quiet, straining to listen. And then they heard it. A faint toll, distant but unmistakable. A bell ringing somewhere in the woods. It echoed softly, the sound carrying across the lake. "That's weird," Ethan muttered. "Out here. Who'd have a bell in the middle of nowhere?" Tyler's skin prickled. The sound seemed too deliberate, too rhythmic. It rang 3 times, then stopped. The silence afterward was heavier than before, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Jessica forced a laugh, though it was shaky. Probably an old church or something in a nearby town. Rachel didn't look convinced. She kept staring into the trees, her expression troubled. It didn't sound like a church bell. It sounded closer. They tried to shake it off, returning to their fire and their stories, but Tyler couldn't stop glancing toward the dark forest. Something about that sound felt wrong, like it didn't belong to the world they knew. Eventually, they put out the fire and retreated into the cabin. The night was thick and quiet again, only the occasional chirp of an insect breaking it. Tyler lay awake for a long time, listening, waiting. Just before he drifted to sleep, he thought he heard it again. The faint toll of the bell, muffled and far away, yet echoing inside his skull. The next morning, the group tried to laugh it off as just nerves from being alone in such a remote place. They decided to go hiking along the trails that wrapped around the lake. The woods were beautiful in the daylight, full of towering pines and birdsong. The air smelled of earth and moss. It felt alive in a way the campground hadn't. But as they walked deeper into the forest, Rachel grew more unsettled. She kept looking over her shoulder, pausing to listen. Finally she said, "Don't you guys feel like we're being watched?" Ethan rolled his eyes. "You're just spooked from last night. Nobody's out here but us." Yet even Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was holding secrets. Every snapping twig made him flinch. Every shadow between the trees looked like a figure. About an hour into the hike, they stumbled upon something strange. Cabin. It was old, much older than the ones at the campground. Its roof sagged, the wood was gray and rotten, and vines crawled up its walls. But the oddest thing was the bell tower that rose above it, a small, weather-beaten steeple with a rusted iron bell still hanging inside. Jessica froze. "Okay, that's creepy." Ethan laughed nervously. "So that's where the bell came from. Mystery solved." But Tyler shook his head. "No. That bell hasn't been rung in years. Look at it. It's rusted solid." Rachel stepped closer, staring at the structure. "Then how did we hear it?" The air seemed colder around the cabin. The woods had gone silent, as if the birds themselves refused to sing near it. Tyler felt his stomach twist with unease. He grabbed Rachel's arm gently. "Come on. Let's go back. This place. It doesn't feel right." Reluctantly, they turned back toward the campground. But the memory of the bell tower clung to them, a shadow that followed even in the daylight. That night, as they sat by the fire again, the air grew unnaturally still. Tyler tried to keep the mood light, joking and telling stories, but Rachel remained tense, her gaze fixed on the tree-line. And then, just as the fire burned low, the bell tolled again. Closer this time. 4 deep, resonant strikes that echoed across the lake. Jessica clutched Ethan's arm, her face pale. "It's impossible. We saw it. That bell can't ring," Rachel whispered. "It's not ringing for us to hear it with our ears. It's ringing somewhere else, and we're catching it." The others stared at her. "What do you mean?" Tyler asked. Rachel swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I don't think this campground exists anymore. I think we're in a place that shouldn't be here." The silence that followed was unbearable. Tyler's mind raced, but before he could respond, something moved in the woods. Shadow. Figure. Tall and indistinct, standing just beyond the firelight. The four of them froze. The figure didn't move closer, but Tyler could feel its eyes on them, watching, waiting. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it melted back into the darkness. The fire crackled. The bell tolled once more, low and heavy, like the beating of a distant heart. And Tyler knew with a cold certainty that whatever they had stumbled into was only just beginning. The following night was a repeat of the last. Mark, Sarah, and Dylan tried to stick together, though every step through the fields felt heavier, more reluctant. Dylan carried his baseball bat this time, gripping it so tight his knuckles went white. Sarah had her flashlight, though the beam seemed weaker than usual, as if the darkness had grown denser overnight. Mark led the way, his jaw set, determined to face whatever stalked them. The cicadas buzzed loudly, almost drowning out their footsteps, until they all heard it again, the rustle of corn, steady and deliberate, as though something was pacing them. Sarah shined her light toward the noise, but just like before, the rows of corn stood perfectly still, leaves trembling only with the night breeze. Still they all knew something was there. Watching. "Come out!" Dylan shouted suddenly, swinging the bat at the stalks. His voice cracked, betraying his fear. "Stop hiding!" No answer. Only silence, so deep it made their ears ring. They pressed further into the maze-like fields, toward where Mark swore he had seen the figure the night before. The stalks grew taller the deeper they went, the dry leaves brushing against their shoulders like skeletal hands. The air grew colder, unnaturally so, as if the field itself rejected their presence. Sarah stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. They all froze. Under the sound of the wind and insects, there was something else. Breathing. Slow, labored, rasping breaths. And it wasn't coming from any of them. Dylan raised his bat, heart hammering in his chest. "Where?" he hissed. Mark turned in a slow circle, scanning the stalks. Then, in the corner of Sarah's flashlight beam, they all saw it. A figure crouched low between the rows. Its body was thin, unnaturally thin, draped in tattered rags that hung like rotting cloth. Its head was tilted unnaturally, as if its neck were too weak to support it. Two pinpricks of light, eyes or something like them, glowed faintly in the dark. Did not move. It only crouched, staring at them. "Run!" Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. They didn't need to be told twice. The three of them bolted back through the corn, crashing through stalks, not caring about the path. The sound of the thing behind them was immediate. The stalks thrashed violently, footsteps pounding the soil in long, heavy strides. It was chasing them. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her along, but Dylan stumbled, falling to the ground. He looked back and screamed. The figure was only yards away, its long arms stretched unnaturally far, its fingers almost brushing his ankle. Dylan swung his bat wildly, connecting with something solid. The sound was wet like striking meat, but the thing didn't stop. It only reeled back slightly before lunging forward again. Mark and Sarah yanked Dylan to his feet, and the three of them tore through the field until, finally, they burst out onto the gravel road by the farmhouse. Gasping for breath, they dared to look back. The corn swayed violently as if something immense had just stopped moving. Then silence. Nothing came out. They didn't sleep that night. None of them dared close their eyes. The following morning they told Mr. Harris everything. They expected him to laugh it off, to tell them they'd been spooked by a coyote or their imaginations. Instead, his face drained of color. He sat at the kitchen table, his weathered hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "You shouldn't have gone into the field," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Not at night." Sarah frowned. "Why? What was that thing?" Mr. Harris took a long drag, his eyes distant. "My daddy used to warn me." said there was something that lived in the corn. Something that came after dark. Folks around here called it the Watcher. Some said it was a spirit tied to the land. Others thought it was something older, meaner. Whatever it is, it don't like trespassers. Dylan slammed his hand on the table. You knew about this. And you let us stay here. Mr. Harris looked at him, sadness in his eyes. Ain't seen it in years. Thought maybe it was just stories. Guess I was wrong. The kids wanted to leave immediately, but Mark convinced them to stay one more day. He wanted proof. If they could catch the thing on camera, maybe they'd finally understand what they were dealing with. That evening, they set up cameras around the edge of the cornfield. Motion sensors, infrared lenses, even Sarah's phone rigged on a tripod. They sat on the porch, waiting, the farmhouse lights extinguished so the night could swallow them whole. The hours dragged on, the silence oppressive. Then, around midnight, the sensors triggered. One by one, the cameras blinked red. Something was moving out there. Mark grabbed the monitor, eyes widening. The figure was back, walking along the edge of the corn, closer than ever. Its body seemed to shimmer strangely in the night vision, limbs unnaturally long, face obscured by shadow. It stopped directly in front of the camera, staring into the lens. For several long seconds it didn't move. Then, slowly, its mouth stretched open into a wide, gaping grin that looked more like a wound than an expression. And then the feed cut out. The kids screamed as, at that exact moment, every light in the house flickered and died. The air grew icy cold. The sound of heavy footsteps creaked across the porch. It was right outside. Mark fumbled for a flashlight, aiming it at the front door just as the wood began to creak inward, the hinges straining. The Watcher was trying to come in. Sarah grabbed Dylan's arm, pulling him toward the back door, but when they flung it open, the figure was already there, crouched low, waiting. Its head snapped up, eyes glowing faintly in the beam of Sarah's light. Lunged impossibly fast. The three of them bolted upstairs, slamming the bedroom door shut. Dylan braced a dresser against it, his chest heaving with terror. "We're gonna die," he whispered. But then silence again. No footsteps. No rattling of the door. Just silence. They stayed locked in the room until the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains. When they finally dared to open the door, the farmhouse looked untouched. No sign of the thing. No damage to the doors. The only evidence was the cameras, all of them shattered into pieces, wires torn apart as if ripped by claws. They left that morning, packed their bags, said a quick goodbye to Mr. Harris, who didn't try to stop them. He only stood on the porch, watching them go, eyes heavy with a grief that seemed far older than the night before. Years later, Mark stumbled across a local newspaper article while scrolling online. It told of a fire that had destroyed the Harris farmhouse, leaving only the scorched skeleton of the building standing. The cause was never determined. Locals whispered it was the Watcher, that it had finally claimed what was its own. Mark never spoke of it again, but sometimes late at night, he swore he could still hear the rustling of corn outside his window, as though the Watcher had followed him home. The summer air in Willow Creek was heavy, filled with the thick sweetness of blooming honeysuckle and the hum of cicadas. On nights like this, the town felt alive in ways both comforting and unsettling. For Daniel Brooks, a 22-year-old college student home for the summer, it was supposed to be a season of barbecues, late-night drives, and catching up with childhood friends. But Willow Creek had a reputation, one whispered about when parents thought their children weren't listening. The woods that surrounded the town, dense with pine and oak, were said to hold something unnatural. Some people claimed they heard voices at night, while others swore they had seen lights moving between the trees. Daniel never paid much attention to the stories. He was rational, a believer in logic and reason, the kind of guy who dismissed ghost tales as small-town folklore meant to keep kids from wandering too far after dark. That was until one humid night in July when his best friend, Tyler, convinced him to join a group heading into the woods for a bonfire. "Come on, man," Tyler had said with a grin, shoving Daniel playfully as they loaded a cooler into the back of Tyler's pickup. "It's tradition. Everyone does it." Besides, what's the worst that could happen? We roast marshmallows, maybe drink a few beers, tell some stories, and head home before midnight. Daniel hesitated. Something about going into those woods, especially at night, made his stomach twist. He thought about the missing person posters that had been taped to the grocery store's bulletin board earlier that summer. 2 teenagers from a neighboring town had vanished on their way home from a party, last seen near Willow Creek's forest. The police had chalked it up to runaways, but the timing and location gnawed at him. But Tyler was insistent, and their friends Megan and Ashley were already planning to come. Megan had even joked that Daniel needed to lighten up, that he was becoming an old man trapped in a 22-year-old body. So against his instincts he agreed. By 9 o'clock, they were driving down the narrow dirt road that led to the clearing. The sky was a deep indigo, stars beginning to pierce through the fading twilight. The woods pressed in on both sides, branches arching overhead to form a tunnel. Every so often, the headlights caught the glint of animal eyes before vanishing into darkness. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, fingers drumming against his knees, trying to ignore the creeping unease. When they arrived, there were already a dozen people gathered. Someone had built a large fire pit in the center of the clearing, flames crackling and sending sparks spiraling upward. Music played softly from a speaker, and laughter carried through the night. For a while, Daniel managed to relax. He sat on a log, a marshmallow skewered on a stick, listening to Ashley tell an exaggerated story about a haunted farmhouse she swore she once visited. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Started with the sound. A low, rhythmic noise, almost like a hum, weaving its way through the trees. At first, Daniel thought it was just the cicadas, but the longer he listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't insects. It was voices. Distant, layered, as if dozens of people were chanting in unison. He glanced around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the others were too wrapped up in their conversations. Finally, Megan caught his eye. She tilted her head, frowning. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "I thought it was just me." The chanting grew louder, closer, though when Daniel looked toward the trees, there was nothing but shifting shadows. A few others began to notice, the laughter fading as people exchanged nervous glances. Tyler, ever the brave one, stood up and cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing. "Who's out there?" The chanting stopped instantly, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the sudden, oppressive silence. Even the cicadas seemed to have quieted. "Probably just some other kids messing with us," Ashley said, though her voice trembled. But Daniel felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Whoever or whatever had been making that sound, it hadn't felt like a prank. They tried to shake it off, restarting the music and passing around the cooler, but the mood had shifted. Everyone was tense, glancing over their shoulders, jumping at the smallest sound. It wasn't long before someone suggested they head out, and most quickly agreed. As they gathered their things, Daniel realized Megan was missing. He scanned the clearing, heart racing, until he spotted her near the edge of the woods, her back turned to the firelight. She stood completely still, staring into the darkness. "Megan!" Daniel called, walking toward her. She didn't answer, didn't even flinch. When he reached her, he touched her arm gently. "Hey, you okay?" She turned to him slowly, her eyes glassy, as if she were in a trance. "They want us to follow," she whispered. Daniel's blood ran cold. "Who?" Before she could answer, Tyler's voice broke through the tension. "Come on, let's go." Daniel tugged Megan back toward the group, but she resisted at first, her gaze still fixed on the trees. Finally, she blinked and seemed to snap out of it, shaking her head as if waking from a dream. They piled into the trucks and cars, headlights slicing through the darkness as engines roared to life. Daniel sat beside Megan in the back seat, watching her nervously. She said nothing the entire ride back, only stared out the window at the trees rushing past. That night, Daniel lay awake in his bed, the chanting replaying in his mind. When he finally drifted off, His dreams were filled with faceless figures standing among the trees, their mouths moving in silent unison. The following days were strange. Megan barely left her house, and when Daniel tried to check on her, her mother said she wasn't feeling well. Tyler brushed the whole thing off as creepy but harmless, insisting that they just let their imaginations get the best of them. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He began noticing things in town, odd little details that others seemed to ignore. Street lights flickering when he passed beneath them. A dark figure reflected in shop windows that disappeared when he turned to look. The sound of chanting, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind even in the middle of the day. One evening, about a week after the bonfire, Daniel received a text from Megan. "Meet me at the woods. Midnight." His stomach dropped. He tried calling her but she didn't answer. He debated ignoring it, but something told him he couldn't. If Megan was in trouble, he couldn't let her go alone. So at midnight, he drove out to the dirt road leading to the clearing. The forest loomed around him, silent and watchful. As he got out of the car, he saw Megan standing just beyond the tree line, pale in the moonlight. "You came," she said softly. "Megan, what are you doing out here? This is crazy." "They're waiting," she replied, her voice distant. "They've been waiting for us." Before Daniel could respond, the chanting began again, louder this time, vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. Figures emerged from the trees. Dozens of them, cloaked in shadows, faces obscured. They surrounded the clearing, their voices blending into a chilling harmony. Daniel grabbed Megan's hand. "We have to go." But she pulled away, stepping toward the figures. "No, Daniel. This is where I belong now." He reached for her, panic rising, but the shadows closed in. One of the figures extended a hand toward Megan, and she took it willingly. The chanting swelled, drowning out Daniel's desperate shouts. Then, in an instant they were gone. The figures, the chanting, Megan, vanished into the night, leaving Daniel alone in the silent woods. The fireflies that once floated peacefully now seemed like dim lanterns marking a path straight into oblivion. Jason's breath was shallow, his throat dry as he stared at the cabin from the tree line. Inside, the faint flicker of lantern light moved as though someone, or something, was pacing. The group had retreated here hoping to wait out the horror, but the sense of being hunted had only intensified. Sarah clutched her arms tightly around herself, rocking slightly on the wooden bench just outside the door, her nerves visibly unraveling. "Jason," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's not just watching us. It's waiting for us. Don't you feel it?" Jason forced a swallow, then nodded. "Yeah, it's not random. It wants us to come to it." He looked back at the dense woods where they had left behind their tents, their coolers, their safe illusions of a summer weekend getaway. The forest was no longer familiar. It had turned into something alive, breathing in rhythm with their fear. Mark stood by the window with his hands braced on the sill, peering out into the night. He hadn't spoken much since they had made it to the cabin. His usually confident demeanor had melted away, replaced with silence and a taut jawline that made him look older. "It's circling us," he finally muttered. "I've seen the shadows. One second it's near the lake. The next it's by the tree line. Then the roof creaks." He turned to the others, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "It's not bound by the same rules we are. It doesn't move like we do." Emily, who had been the calmest up until now, suddenly burst out. "Then why are we sitting here waiting for it?" Her voice cracked, betraying her desperation. She grabbed her backpack and threw it on the table, her hands shaking as she tried to dig for the flashlight and pocket knife she had stashed. "We should run. Drive out of here. Anything's better than waiting." Jason moved quickly, grabbing her wrist before she could storm outside. "No, Emily, no. You saw what happened when we tried to leave earlier. Every path curved back here. We're trapped. Don't you get it? This isn't just the woods anymore. We're inside something else." Emily froze, tears brimming in her eyes. She knew he was right. The moment they had set foot on that dirt road and tried to hike out, the trees had shifted subtly, tricking them until they were back at the cabin like mice in a maze. She dropped heavily into the chair, covering her face with her hands. The silence stretched for a while, the four of them huddled together, their breaths sinking in unease. Then came the sound, 3 deliberate knocks on the door. Not frantic banging, not scratching, just slow, calm knocks, as though a neighbor had politely come calling. Sarah let out a strangled whimper. Jason's hand automatically went for the iron poker by the fireplace, gripping it like a lifeline. Nobody moved toward the door. Nobody dared to. Another 3 knocks. Then a voice. Jason. The sound was wrong, off. It was his father's voice. Calm, gentle, the same voice that had once called him to dinner as a child. Jason felt the air rush out of his chest. His father had passed away 6 years ago. Jason, the voice repeated. Open the door. It's all right. Mark shook his head violently, his lips forming a single word. Don't. Jason's knuckles whitened on the iron poker, his whole body trembling. That voice carried the warmth of every summer evening he had ever spent on the porch with his father. The smell of barbecues, the laughter. It was perfect. Too perfect. Not him, Jason whispered to himself, shaking his head hard as though to rattle the illusion loose. The voice changed then, morphing with a wet, static hiss. Emily, it said now, smooth and coaxing, and this time it sounded exactly like her younger brother back home. Emily staggered backward, hitting the wall, covering her ears with both hands. Stop it, stop it, stop it, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. The knocks grew harder, not polite anymore. Each strike rattled the wood. Sarah sank to the floor and buried her face in her knees, sobbing. Mark grabbed a heavy chair and wedged it against the door, his eyes darting toward the others. It's trying to get in. Knows us. It knows everything about us. The lantern inside the cabin flickered violently, then died, plunging them into suffocating blackness. The only light came from the window, where the forest fireflies glowed an eerie yellow-green, pulsing like veins. In the dark, Jason whispered, Everyone stay quiet. Don't answer it. Don't even breathe if you can help it. But the silence did not last. A scraping sound came from the roof, slow and deliberate, like claws dragging across shingles. Then the whispering began. Thousands of hushed voices layered on top of one another, rising and falling like a tide, unintelligible but hypnotic. Sarah lost control first. She screamed and bolted for the door. Jason tried to grab her, but she slipped past his grip and yanked the latch before anyone could stop her. The door swung wide, and the cabin filled with cold air and the overwhelming chorus of whispers. Sarah, no! Emily cried out, reaching for her. But Sarah was gone, swallowed by the darkness outside. They heard her footsteps pounding down the porch, then a strangled gasp, then silence. Jason, Mark, and Emily stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. And then, slowly, the knocking resumed, this time from the back wall of the cabin. Mark's face contorted. It's toying with us. He pulled Jason aside, whispering frantically. Listen. We can't sit here anymore. Sarah's gone. We're next. We have to do something. Jason's eyes darted around the room. His mind, despite the terror, clung desperately to reason. There's a cellar, he said suddenly. I saw the hatch earlier under the rug. If we hide there, maybe it won't find us. Emily gave a hollow laugh, tears still streaking her face. You think hiding underground is going to stop that thing? Did you not hear what it just did to Sarah? But Mark was already dragging the rug aside, revealing the wooden hatch door with a rusted iron ring for a handle. He yanked it open, the hinges groaning loudly. A waft of stale, earthy air rose up, smelling of damp soil. We don't have a choice, Jason said firmly. He grabbed Emily's arm, guiding her toward the hatch despite her protests. She resisted for a moment, but when the whispering surged louder outside, she finally caved, stumbling down the wooden ladder first. Mark followed, and Jason lowered himself in last, pulling the hatch closed above them. The cellar was pitch black, colder than the air above, and cramped with low ceilings. They could hear the creaks of the cabin above them, every sound amplified. Jason fumbled with his lighter, sparking it until a small flame gave them a flicker of light. Wooden beams surrounded them, and on the far side of the cellar stood shelves lined with jars, pickled vegetables, old preserves. But as the flame grew steadier, Jason noticed something carved into the beams. Words etched deep into the wood. He moved closer, holding the lighter up. His heart froze. The carvings spelled out names. Names of people. And there they were. Sarah, Emily, Mark, Jason. Their names carved among dozens of others. The wood splintered from frantic hands that had written them. Emily saw it too and let out a broken sob. It knew. It's always known. Above them, the hatch rattled violently. The voices swelled into a deafening roar, shaking dust loose from the beams. Jason dropped the lighter in shock, plunging them back into darkness. The cellar filled with the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps descending the ladder.